Welcome to the Stay on Target webinar today. My name is Corey Cox. I'm part of the education team here at URS, and I have here with me Jeff Draper, who is one of our retirement planning advisors. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We have attached a file that refers to the savings plans and investment options that we offer here at URS on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. This handout will be beneficial to you as a reference throughout the presentation as Jeff goes over the target date funds today. Also, if you do have any questions, you are welcome to ask those questions there in the Q&A section on the bottom of your screen. We'll have people here to help answer those questions as we go throughout the presentation and after the presentation today. And with that being said, let me go ahead and introduce to you Jeff Draper. He is one of URS's retirement planning advisors. He has been involved in the financial industry for about 10 years now, has his certified financial advisor certification, and has been with URS for 2 of those years. I know the information that he's going to provide today will be helpful for you and valuable in helping you make good investment decisions. So with that being said, let me go ahead and turn it over to Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Corey. And also thanks so much for attending the webinar this afternoon, I guess. I was about to say this morning. So we're glad to have you here. I felt like it was an important thing that we touch on one of our really valuable offerings called target date funds. We'll get into what that means and how we handle those things. But just as a little bit of an introduction prior to diving into this stuff, about 36% of URS members are currently using target date funds. I feel that they're so valuable that we can maybe make some efforts here on this webinar and as we go throughout the state delivering presentations and also meeting with our members one-on-one to do retirement planning. That's something that we can really hit on pretty hard because we're going to see here how valuable these target date funds can be. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Okay, so let's start by defining what exactly a target date fund is. For myself and other folks in the industry, we see these kind of things all the time. We just know what they mean and we assume that people know what they mean. But the truth is a lot of people do not know what a target date fund is. They don't know a lot of the options that are available to them in their 401ks or their IRAs. So what a target date fund is an investment that you can purchase inside of your 401k, your IRA, or if you're with a participating employer with URS that offers a 457 or a Roth IRA as well. So basically think of it as that 401k is kind of like a box that can hold different types of investments inside of that box. Some of those investments happen to be called target date funds. Okay? So target date funds are designed to help you manage investment risk. They're professionally managed and they're very, very low cost. You've heard the old saying, don't put your eggs all in one basket. A target date fund is one way to help with that diversification. So what is a target date fund not? Okay, so people hear the term target date fund, and then there's typically a year associated with that target date fund, which we'll look at in a moment. People sometimes think that by the time they hit that target date year, they will be able to get a guaranteed amount of monthly income, or they will have a guaranteed specific amount of value in their 401k by the time they hit that year in the target date fund. Neither of those things is true. A target date fund essentially is meant to manage risk at an appropriate level based on your age and risk tolerance. It does not provide guarantees. So in that way, it's quite different from a pension that you would get through URS, which guarantees a monthly income for your lifetime. Okay, so target date funds, we can see here that you can purchase a target date fund in your retirement account regardless of where you are in your career. So if you're a little ways away from retiring, you would buy a target date fund that's a little further into the future. So just to give you an example here, if we look along the top line, it says target date 2060 on the left side, and then you go all the way over to the right to target date retired. Okay, so I personally, I'm planning on working another 30 years or so, and that's going to put me by default somewhere in the target date 2045 range, something like that. Now, if I have a slightly different risk tolerance, I could go a little bit further out or a little bit closer to the present year. Uh, but as you can see, there's a whole variety of target date funds that can take into account how long you have until you retire. So if you want to look at this as well in the documentation that's provided, um, you can go to page 6 and 7 of that provided document. And here's a nice little chart that illustrates how these are managed. So again, it really comes back to your level of expertise with investments. Of course, you can pick and choose your own investments for your 401k, but the target date is really nice because it will automatically be designed at varying risk levels depending on your age and your risk tolerance. So looking at this chart here, if we go back to our target date 2060, which is on the far left, we can see the investment allocation has very low exposure to bonds. So bonds are what are also known as fixed income products or debt issued by companies that pays a regular interest payment. So bonds tend to be very, very conservative. But if you're out there on the far left in the target date 2060 fund, we know probably that you're pretty young and that you've got a little while left, in fact, probably 30 plus years until you're ready to retire. So what we can do based on that information is we can go a much more aggressive investment portfolio, because the more risk we take in the long run, the more return we can rely upon. But if we start to go to the right, we go over to say target date 2035. That's much closer to the current year. That also indicates that we have less time until retirement, and maybe we can't stomach the same kind of volatility that we could 20, 30 years earlier. And then if we continue on all the way to the right, let's say target date 2020, we can see now that stocks in the purple have come down very substantially in their risk exposure, and bonds have come in and filled in that gap along with some real assets, which are, I like to call them less correlated assets that don't have a strong correlation to the US investment stock market. This is all done for you automatically, and we'll touch on that again, but this is a huge benefit to target date funds. I like to say a lot of our URS members have their own areas of expertise. They go to work every day, they do a great job, but a lot of them don't want another job when they get home. And if you choose your own investments, there can be a lot of work involved in making sure that you have a good portfolio that has the right amount of risk. You can do that, but it does take time and effort. Or you can do the target date approach where you have a team of professionals that have come up with this investment strategy path for you. So really huge benefit to really have it managed for you automatically. Okay, so touched on this a little bit, but this is really key when we're talking about target date funds, because as I said before, it's difficult to do it by yourself, and it can take a lot of time and study. But there's two real large risks that you're looking at as you're planning for your retirement. Taking too much risk and taking too little risk. A lot of people don't really think about that second bullet point very much, taking too little risk. But that is very much a risk in and of itself. If you're invested in a very low risk investment, you're going to get a very low return, and you may not even do as well as inflation, which has averaged around 2 to 2.5% over the last 60 years. So if you're not doing 2 to 2.5% returns in your investment portfolio, you're actually still losing money because you're not keeping up with the cost of goods. So I like to harp on that one a little bit, because why wouldn't you just put all of your money in a CD with the bank or in a savings account? Well, that's the risk that you encounter there, is not keeping up with inflation. I don't need to talk too much about the first bullet point because I think that's fairly obvious. But if you do take too much risk, you can have a lot more volatility. You can have up years that are 40 or 50%. You can have down years that are 30, 40 plus percent as well. And the major issue there is if you have a really bad loss right before you retire, that can completely change or derail your retirement plans. Okay, so manage risk is very important, especially as you get closer to retirement. And as I pointed out on the previous slide right here, that's something that is done for you automatically in a target date fund. Okay, so let's highlight 4 key reasons why you might want to consider using a target date fund. Here they are outlined on this page. They're one-stop shop. It's a set it, forget it approach. You put your money in every paycheck, and URS handles those target date funds for you. They rebalance and they reduce investment risk over time. You can't time the market, which means you can't reliably get in and out at the right time every single time, and they're extremely low cost. Okay, so let's focus on that first bullet point. One-stop shop. So instead of doing it yourself and learning all that science about efficient frontiers and tangency portfolios, all this stuff that probably sounds like a foreign language to you, instead of getting up to speed on all that, you can select a target date fund that is managed for you according to the latest and the greatest science of modern portfolio theory. And as I touched on before, it doesn't matter where you're at in your career, there's a target date fund that will match your risk profile pretty closely. Okay, one-stop shop, set it and forget it. I like to use the example of the Ronco food dehydrator, where if you've ever seen those infomercials, that was his catchphrase. You put the food in the dehydrator, you set it, and you forget it. That's the approach here with target date funds. Okay, next point, we reduce and rebalance that risk over time. So as we saw in that chart, I'm going to keep touching back on this because I think it illustrates it really well. That risk comes down over time as you get closer. So that again is also done for you. All you have to do is get your contributions coming into that fund every paycheck, and then as you get closer, we'll bring that risk down for you such that by the time you're ready to retire, you're in a position of preservation of your money rather than accumulation of your money. And that's a very low risk type of portfolio, so that when you do retire, there's not a lot of investment volatility going into retirement. Okay, reason number 3, you can't time the market. I've met with over 200 people over 400 people in individual retirement planning sessions since I've been here for the last 2 years. And so in those sessions, I hope some of you have had a chance to meet with us one-on-one and do some financial planning. In those sessions, I've met with so many people that feel like they can buy some investment in their 401k and then they can sell it before the market crashes. And maybe they do, maybe they've gotten lucky once or twice. The problem is getting back into the investment after the market has corrected. Even the experts can't reliably time the market. So that's the first point on this slide. And there's a reference to a research paper that was done relative to the recommendations of experts and how accurately they were able to get in and out of the stock market at the right time. The truth is, the science shows us that if you leave your money in and you're disciplined and you rebalance to the appropriate risk level, you're going to do better than if you try to jump out and jump back into the market at the right time. So that's what a target date fund can come in and help us do. They're managed to the risk level. They're not jumping in and out of the market trying to time it. Okay, so last reason here to consider a target date fund. They're very low cost. Okay, so there's a lot of misinformation out there about what the cost is for investments. There's some less reputable people that go around and tell people that they can get them involved with a product that has no fees. That's definitely never true. Whenever there's an investment, there's always some kind of cost associated with it. So you want to be dealing with something that's very transparent about the costs and very competitive with the costs. So I know this is really small, but if you want to look at page 7 in that handout, it's over on the right side under the low annual fees section on the right. So here it is, fully transparent. This is everything that you pay for your fees, and this comes out before your investment returns are reported to you. Okay, so if you see that you got a 7% return for the year on your investment, that already accounts for this fee coming out. Okay, and just to kind of put this in perspective, if we look at those target date funds, they're really pretty close to the same fee, around 0.37, 0.38% of your assets. So that is based on the total amount of assets that you have in that target date fund is how they determine that fee. Okay, so very, very low fees. You guys out there may not have really too much of a basis to compare this to, but I actually do, because I used to run an investment advisory business of my own where I would charge people a fee for my advice. And just as a comparison, I'll kind of run down what my fees were so that you can compare that to professionally managed fees with funds with URS. So I would charge 1% of a member's assets for my advice. And in addition to that, I would choose investment options for them, which would typically range from 1/4 to 0.5% of their assets. And then we had some miscellaneous trading and ticket charges. So by the time we added that all up together, we were sitting at about 1.5 to 1.75% for investment management advice. So I don't need to tell you that 1.5% is a lot higher than 0.38%. And that holds true pretty much across the industry. So if you compare these fees here for those target date funds relative to a lot of the other options available in the industry, we're going to compare very favorably. And that's why we like to show our fees. We're very transparent with them because we know we compare very favorably. So 2 last things that I want to point out on this. One of them being you can choose a target date fund for about 0.38%, get professional investment management that reduces risk automatically over time. You can actually get that for less than some of our individual funds on their own with no investment management involved. So just compare, for example, a target date 2060 to the one right above it, small cap stock. You can see you can choose the small cap stock, which is not professionally managed, and it costs more as well. So it could actually save you money. Okay, and the last point I wanted to bring up here The more money that you keep and does not go to someone else, first of all, you get to keep it. That's great, but it also compounds much more powerfully. So when you're not paying it to someone else, your money can grow and your interest can earn interest. That's the power of compounding. Okay, extremely low fees, and you can let more of that money compound for you. Okay, so hopefully I've done a good job of describing some of those benefits. I would not be doing my job if I didn't really talk up how great target date funds are. So hopefully now some of you are asking yourselves, how do I make that change, or how can, if I work with some other folks in their investments as like their HR manager or something, how can I help myself or them get into a target date fund? Okay, so there's one really cool thing that we do for you automatically. So if you never make a change to your investments in your 401k or your IRA, you will automatically be put into the target date fund that is closest to the year you turn 65. Okay, that's if we know nothing about you and you just come into the system, we know your date of birth and that's it. You will be defaulted to that target date fund. You can also then take a risk tolerance questionnaire on the URS website to identify your risk tolerance and also provide a little more guidance on your appropriate target date fund. But even if you come into the system and you don't do anything to your investments, we will put you into a target date fund, which is really awesome. If you had in the past manually chosen your investments, you would still be in those investments. And that's where I come in today to hopefully present to you some of the really incredible benefits of the target date funds and to maybe see if it might be enough to persuade you to make that change if you have some other investments that you made in the past. Okay, you can always choose a different target date fund. The same trading rules apply. You don't want to make a change more frequently than every 30 days or there will be a fee. Okay, so how then do we make that change? So this should, I hope, look familiar to most of you. If not, I would encourage you to go to urs.org and log into your account, check on the status of your investments. But this is just simply a picture of our homepage, urs.org. So what you'll want to do is log in, clicking that login button in the top right. And then you'll select your savings plans. Maybe some of you have multiple savings plans, like, a 401k or an IRA. You can select that by simply clicking on Access next to that account. Okay. So then once we get inside that account, we can click over on the left side in the red box, the Change Investments link. You click on that, and from there you have the option to change your target date fund or to any of those other individual funds for that matter. So what we're going to do today to show you how to get into a target date fund, you can click on Add Investment Options, and then you can select the appropriate target date fund. And there's one key point that I forgot to bring up before, so I'll bring it up now. Typically, you would go into the target date fund that is closest to when you're going to be 65, or if you've done that risk tolerance questionnaire, the target date fund that it advises for you. But we also have some people that go with a target date fund that is a little closer or a little further away. Ultimately, what you're looking at is when you want to access the money in your retirement account. So if you're going to hit your 20 or 30 years, depending on your system, when you're in your early to mid 50s, and you have a 457 and you want to use the money in that 457, you may actually want to have that target date fund closer to your your desired age that you will draw money out of it. The inverse is also true. I talk to a lot of people when I meet with them one-on-one, and they say, okay, well, I'm going to have my pension, I'm going to have Social Security. That actually might be enough for me. Um, I don't really want to touch the money in my 401k or my Roth IRA until later on. And if that's the case, you would bump that target date fund a little bit further out. One key example to this is at age 70 and a half, the government will start requiring that you take small distributions out of your 401k and your IRA. And if you want to structure your target date fund such that it is the target when you turn 70, that would be a reasonable strategy as well. Okay, so back to where we were at before, this is how we add that target date fund. We can click on, for example, target date 2035, and then click on add selected. So now that target date here is going to show up here on the second line. You can see we've got a default of target date 2025 right above that. To move that money over to the target date 2035 fund, I simply need to type 100%, click on continue, and then click on confirm. Okay, so with that being said, it's very simple to make that adjustment to change target date funds. As I mentioned before, you can change at any time. Just try to do it less than once every 30 days so we can avoid those fees. But other than that, you can make the change. But that's the whole point of the target date fund, right? If you make that change, it's handled for you, so you don't really need to come in and make it again. Versus if you purchased your own small cap fund and your own large cap fund, you would want to try to keep that in balance, and that would require that you come back in every once in a while and rebalance your portfolio yourself. Again, nothing that you need to worry about if you have a target date fund. Okay, so that's a lot of information. As I said, I personally use target date funds. I think they're extremely valuable. I've met with many members and they've made the change as well. But that is a lot of information to take in. That's why we attach the investment options brochure for you to keep and peruse at your leisure. But if you do have any additional questions when we're done with this webinar, feel free to reach out to us at that URS Savings Plans phone number, 801-366-7720. As Corey mentioned also, we'll hang out here for a little while after the webinar as well to try to answer any additional questions that you may have. Okay, and I've already plugged this a couple times as well. If you have not met with myself or one of my other fellow retirement advisors, you can register for an individual retirement planning session on the website. And once you log in, you can click on that education tab circled there in red and select the fourth option down, individual retirement planning session. We are here every day at our offices on 2nd South and 5th East, but we're also everywhere throughout the state. So if you're not local in the Salt Lake area, watch out for times that we're going to be all throughout the state offering these individual sessions as well. So again, thank you so much for attending this webinar on target date funds. We'll be around to answer any additional questions for a few minutes as well. And we'll turn it back over to Corey for a minute.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for your participation in the Stay on Target webinar. We appreciate your participation. I hope that you can rely on this knowledge to help select the right investment options for you so that you can enjoy a prosperous retirement down the road. Again, as Jeff mentioned, we will stick on the webinar for a few minutes after to ensure that all of your questions were answered. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.